Hi there. This is a quick preview of the full episode-by-episode outline, which I've developed for House of the Dragon Season 2, by closely following filming reports on a daily basis throughout 2023, cross-referenced with spy photos, casting information, rarely when there was a leaked script page which through various means we could confirm was real. But the point is, this is not a wish list of what I want or simply assume to be true, but what we can confirm to be true through citations. And by we, I mean the wider fan analysis community, of which I am not even one of the big ones like Wake the Dragon or House the Dragon. So this isn't even just my outline, but the shared information from cross-referencing each other's notes. This is generally agreed upon. And the analysis community has had a decently accurate outline for Season 2 since filming wrapped at the end of last September. The 3 teaser trailers they've put out since then have not significantly altered it, in many cases have aligned with it. So why am I dashing off this preview now? Well, because we know that the full trailer is coming out 1 week from today on May 14th, Tuesday. And I wanted to get this done by Christmas, but I realized I need to put a lot of time and effort into citations on this in order to compete with clickbaiters who just say what they want. I need to put in every spy photo, every citation, a lot of effort. It'll be very slow, and other projects kept coming up every time there's a new teaser. On top of that, offline stuff at my job and stuff, I realized it's so late in the game that while I am nearly caught up, and I could work really hard to get a full outline with all the citations and all the photos done and edited, because editing takes time, by this coming Sunday, Mother's Day. 2 days later on Tuesday, I need to update it anyway for any new information in the final trailer, which is also, everything up to now is a teaser. The final thing they put out is a full trailer, which has like new characters in it and stuff. Just what I consider the definitive version with proof comes later, and I have covered most of this in individual episodes. It's really just a recap mostly. And after the last teasers came out, I did rush off a thing saying I'm working on an outline, but to cut to the chase, the biggest question is what's the stopping point? And I said this is what we think the stopping point is, which is surprisingly earlier. And I'll get to that so I don't repeat myself, but I've already shared this information of what we think the end point is. And other people are, of course, making things up of, no, they're getting all these other big battles, which would only come by Season 3. To start with, we're pretty sure Daeron and Nettles are not in Season 2, but they will start mentioning them in dialogue, and they'll show up in the Season 3 premiere. I've covered this in other videos, and this works surprisingly well. They're going at a slower pace. On top of that, another broad thing is the episodes we know the least about are episodes 3 and 6. But through process of elimination, I think we can get a feel for what subplots are in those. I'll cover that at the end. But rushing through this, because there's only 8 episodes, Episode 1 is mostly reactions to Luke's death, both at Dragonstone and King's Landing. A lot of this we saw in teasers. Now, the cold open, the prologue to the season, just as Harrenhal Council was the prologue to Season 1, the cold open to the first episode will be Winterfell. To hook people in that, yes, the prequel Starks are coming, it's Winterfell reacting to news that King Viserys has died. Because otherwise the Starks don't really show up until Episode 3, and they want to know they're coming. So I've covered this in other videos, that they invented this thing of actually it's Rhaenyra who flew around looking for Luke's body. Then they have a funeral for him, and apparently Jace doubled back from the Eyrie to go to the funeral, then goes to Winterfell, and the travel time makes decent sense. So okay, it gives the opportunity, maybe there's a scene of her telling him about the prophecy before he goes back north again. But Episode 1 is reactions from both sides, that promo photos showed that Jace is at the funeral. And then also in the teasers, we see Daemon taking Harrenhal in the middle of a thunderstorm by complete surprise, and we know from other leaks that he takes a minor wound that gets treated by Alice Rivers, the mysterious witch healer of Harrenhal. Now, a big thing that people are just not paying attention to, but the fan community figured out that Blood and Cheese is not in episode 1, despite the wish listing people do. The end of episode 1 is them being hired, and it ends on this cliffhanger of we'll have a son for a son, dun dun dun. And then the actual Blood and Cheese assassination is at the very start of episode 2. Now, for a time, we thought that the subsequent funeral procession and Cargill Bowl retaliation for that were in episode 3. We have now found out those are also in episode 2. It's like the beginning is Blood and Cheese, the middle is a funeral procession, and at the very end is Cargill Bowl, which we've seen in trailers. And I suspect that the very final short 30-second scene as a hook for the next episode will be Jace arriving at Winterfell on his dragon. Because this is speculation, but otherwise Blood and Cheese is so dark that how else would you keep people watching except if the Starks are at least in a little by the end of episode 2. We don't know much about what's going on in episode 3. We know a few things. This and 6 we know the least about. We know that the Battle of Burning Mill between the Blackwoods and Brackens is probably in this episode. It is the first field battle of the war. Their rivals, each joined an opposite side, Rhaenyra or Aegon, that happens this episode. Ends with Daemon cutting off the Brackens' retreat on his dragon, and you see that in the trailer, him going, "Surrender or your house burns." So we know that happens, and in response to this in Blood and Cheese, Aegon fires Otto and replaces him with Criston Cole. Good, to war then. Saw that in the trailer. But I think the bulk of the Starks introduction will be in episode 3. That we know they have drastically expanded the northern storyline, that they're even going to the Wall. They didn't do that in the book. But we can't tie it to specific episodes yet. Everyone knows, because it was very public info, that episode 4 is the big battle episode of the season, mostly dominated by the Battle of Rook's Rest. Because when you know the director's schedule for every episode, you just compare with spy photos. We saw really good spy photos of Alan Taylor directing the Battle of Rook's Rest. So that's going to take up the bulk of the episode. One major change seen in trailers, which I've addressed in separate videos, is that Baela on Moondancer will be there. But we don't know in what capacity. It's the whole thing we told them, can you expand these characters? Well, okay, but without a full book to base that on, and it could be hit or miss. Like, we wanted them to give Rhaenys more to do, and then we didn't really like what they did in episode 9, but I thought they could have done that with just her escaping without the drama of I could have killed him, but honor and everything. But at any rate, I think this could actually work out pretty well if they manage to incorporate her in a way that it makes sense that Vhagar didn't kill her, because Vhagar would have chomped her like he did Arax. But if it's like she's a scout or she comes late in the battle looking for survivors, I'm fine with that. I'll judge it when I see it, but it could actually be a really good addition, so we'll see. But episode 4 is Battle of Rook's Rest. We know the first half a lot better than we know the second half of the season. But it's safe to assume that episode 5 is mostly dominated by aftermath of Rook's Rest. Both on the black side and the green side, that Rhaenyra arguing with Corlys, and on the other side, Alicent dealing with Aegon and what Aemon's going to do next. We saw spy photos of them parading the head through the streets, as in the book. That feels like a full episode's worth of story there. Then we get to episode 6, which, like I said, we know the least about. That and episode 3. Episode 3 we know a little more, like we know Burning Mill is in it. Episode 6 we knew a lot less. It even has one of the few times there's a standalone director who didn't do other episodes, Andrei Perec from Succession. Like Claire Kilner's doing 2 episodes, Andrei's just doing this one. He didn't even work with the other units. So what are they doing here? And the only thing we could reliably figure out relatively late is that based on solid casting information, those shots you saw in the most recent teasers of the main Lannister army, the combined bannermen of the Westerlands, gathering at Golden Tooth, the gateway into the east, to the Riverlands. The Lannister main army will link up with the Leffords at Golden Tooth in episode 6. Because IMDb lists Lord Lefford as being in episodes 6 and 8. That wouldn't take up a full episode. And also those shots in the trailers of Adam of Hull looking up confused at why is sea smoke following me, that would be in that episode. Otherwise, we don't really know. And I'll tell you right now, thinking on it, because these were the two episodes I couldn't really place, I think that by process of elimination, most of the expanded North storyline with Jason the Starks and the White Walkers will be in episodes 3 and 6. Because we know he pretty much gets to the Starks at the end of episode 2, really episode 3, and other promo photos show him back on Dragonstone by episode 7 for the sowing of the Dragon Seeds. So, yeah, spaced out. We have to get used to, like, Game of Thrones season 3 might have a Daenerys light episode. Like episode 5 focused mostly on Robb Stark and other characters. There was like one Daenerys scene in it. After episode 4 was a mostly Daenerys episode. So get ready for, as the world expands, not every episode might have Rhaenyra or Alicent in it. Just because it's expanding, where they might have a small scene in it. Much as the other show did, that makes sense. So I get the feeling there'll be this subplot through those 4 episodes, from episodes 3 to 6, maybe just 1 or 2 catch-up scenes in 4 and 5, dealing with that invented storyline, because we know very little else that could be filling those places. Episode 7, in contrast, thanks to extensive leaks, we know the most about of any other episode this season. And I've made videos about all this already, so I'll just breeze through that. Daemon is still at Harrenhal, and there's this big scene of him surveying the gathering armies of the River Lords, and the Blackwoods, even the Pipers and Vances we haven't seen in TV before. And then this delegation from the Tullys at Riverrun comes in under young green boy Oscar Tully, who has to have this whole scene explained to him, well, our great-grandfather is technically Lord, but he's a green, but he's on his deathbed. He'll die in a couple of months, so we're just going to wait until then to join you. We have to declare our neutrality for now. Also, the Arryns are in this episode. That there's a big thing where it's not invented, they're showing something that happened off screen in the book. Big thing of Rhaena arriving at the Eyrie and being received by Jane Arryn. I'm not even sure if Jane Arryn is actually on screen in the first episode, or if Jace goes there off screen. She might be, I simply don't know. But definitely there's this expanded thing of, after Jace's return to Dragonstone, Rhaena and Joff are in the Eyrie. So, expanding out to other great houses, episode 7 is pretty big for prequel Tullys and prequel Arryns. But then moving along, for the main characters, Rhaenyra and Daemon, Daemon flies back and forth between Harrenhal because it's a relatively short distance, I'm fine with that. They have the sowing of the dragon seeds as a major set piece in episode 7, the second to last episode. We know this because we had really prominent spy photos of director Lonnie Perisser filming with the lined up dragon seeds on a beach, so that's fine. As I've said, I don't think Nettles is in Season 2 as a speaking character, but they're going to introduce her 2 episodes later in the Season 3 premiere. Because, like in the trailer shots, you only see 3 of the Dragon Seeds having dinner with Rhaenyra. And that they'll start mentioning Daeron, I'm fine with this. We also used to think there was a food riot in Episode 2 involving Alicent. We now know that's a distinct event, that by the end, there wasn't enough time by only 2 episodes. By Episode 7... the Velaryon naval blockade has made things deteriorate enough that there's a food riot, full-scale food riot, in the streets of King's Landing. Alicent gets caught up in it, and you do see shots of this in the recent teasers, that there's a citywide food riot. So that's what Alicent is doing in there, that's what Rhaenyra is doing. Daemon is also receiving them in Harrenhal. He might come to the Dragon Seeds later, or at least by episode 8, I'm not sure. Arryns are in it, Tullys are in it, this is a lot of stuff in here. Episode 8 we know a little less about, but I would point out it's being directed by Geeta Patel, who does not have a history of doing giant battle scenes. So anyone going, oh, it's the battle near King's Landing or Gullet, like, that's what Alan Taylor does. She does not. She does character pieces. I think there is a battle, the Battle of the Red Fork, but it's not going to be a big set piece. So because of that casting information, the Lannister army will come to Red Fork. It's not an ending, it's a beginning. It's, oh no, the main invasion, the main campaign of the war has begun, with the pincers moving by the Greens to Harrenhal, but at the same time the Blacks are getting new dragon riders. Each side is setting its pieces in motion in the game, on the risk board, and setting it up for season 3. And as I've already rushed out a separate video about, I think they're drastically expanding what was a tiny point in the book. That they're going to invent that we know there's going to be this face-to-face Rhaenyra and Alicent meeting. And I suspect took a tiny point from the book to say there's a peace talk that goes nowhere. That there's an attempt at peace negotiations after this phase of the war of should we keep fighting or not. The discussion goes nowhere. All right, now it's war to the knife. The main phase begins with our full standing armies. Season 2 is them rushing out what they had. Mostly for the excuse of giving the lead actors a chance to play off of each other again, which is fine for the sake of having a stopping point. I'm okay with that. So, Gullet, King's Landing things, not this season. Nettles, they'll have a stand-in. I think there's going to be, we've seen more than one black girl lined up amongst the Dragon Seed, so I think it's like a stuntman, a stand-in in the wide shots, so they can later say in season 3, when they cast a professional actor to do it, oh, she was in the background, in the crowd shots. But she's showing up in the season 3 premiere, which is fine. It takes her longer to tame Sheepstealer. And I think as soon as Gwaine shows up, Alicent's brother Gwaine, in the first or second episode, his first interaction will be, "Hey, Uncle Gwaine, how's my brother Daeron doing? You just came back from Old Town." Something like that, so they'll start mentioning them. And, at some point, we know the Greens there'll actually be a scene showing Tyrosh when the Greens send envoys to the Triarchy. So you'll see motion on some of these things, but this is the short version, 15-minute version. And the quick thing that occurred to me was, we don't know that much it's going on in episode 3 and hardly anything in episode 6, because that's probably when all this invented Jason Cregan at the wall, and we've confirmed from the makeup department leaks that the White Walkers are in season 2. That's probably when that's happening. Now, I didn't have time to edit this well, even with the slides and everything. I'm rushing it out a week before the trailer. But this is the rough draft version of what the outline of season 2 looks like. I'm working on the fancy version, which is very well edited and has a lot of slides in it. And I'm trying to get that out within a week of the full trailer.